Hey everyone, back tuning into today's video. We're going to have a look at the weather for the next 8 to 10 days. In today's video, this will take us up to around the 8th of January, so into the start of 2016. We've got a real battle going on over the next week to 10 days between high pressure to the east and the northeast, with a lot of bitterly cold air. It's going to be flooding down across the northern and eastern parts of Europe, and the Atlantic-driven, mild, wet, windy weather that we've been having since the end of October. We've been in this Atlantic-driven sort of onslaught type pattern, and it's very subtle differences as to whether we end up continuing with this very mild Atlantic-driven pattern, or whether we get much colder and brings the risk of snow in from the east. There's not a huge amount in it. It is on a bit of a knife edge, as it always is for us. Our place in the world is between the mild or the warm ocean, this time of year anyway, it's a warm ocean, and the cold landmass. So for us, we're nearly always on a knife edge until these patterns can lock in, and then when they do lock in, the block does lock in, we can sort of extend out for days and weeks with cold weather. But to get there, it's always on a knife edge between whether the Atlantic will be the driver or whether the ridge to the northeast can get ascendancy. And this one is no different. So it looks today, the miles have shifted a little bit more towards an Atlantic sort of onslaught type pattern, keeping us generally mild, wet and windy. But there's not a great deal in it, and we may finish up actually turning a bit colder at some point through the first week of January. I'll show you the charts in a second so you can see for yourself what I'm talking about. But before I go on with that, just say about the ads. There's 6 articles on all pages at Gaston. Have a browse, widgets, click through the links if there's any articles that you're interested in. Thanks very much for doing that. There's also video ads for those pages that you open up the content when you watch them. They'll close back up again, and it's all helping to pay for our website. So we'll start off with the 500 millibar height anomaly charts. We've got the ECMWF on the top and the GFS is on the bottom. These are the mean flow charts for the next week to 10 days. 500 millibars, 80,000 feet, is an area in the action where high pressure, low pressure are being moved around by a jet stream running above. Red extrapolates to high pressure and blue extrapolates to low pressure. So what you can probably see with both of these is that we've got this large ridge here sitting across northern Russia and extending into the north of Scandinavia, and also linking towards some blocking over top of the North Pole, interestingly. And again, we see it on the GFS, so we've got a little bit of blocking over top of the pole, but the main ridge is actually across the north of Russia and to the north of Scandinavia. That's bringing very cold air into the north and the east of Europe from Siberia and from the Arctic. So we really will see a cold plunge for the northeast and the east of Europe over the coming week to 10 days. It's going to be some bitterly cold weather in northern and eastern parts of the continent. Haven't had much cold weather even in the northeast of Europe so far this winter, so it will be quite a shock to the system. Now for us, we've still got this trough of low pressure in the Atlantic and extending into the UK with quite a strong jet stream as well. The jet stream is trending southwards, being moved southwards by this cold air pushing out of Siberia and the Arctic, but it perhaps not moving quite far south enough to allow this cold air to get to us. And the main problem, the stopper, is this ridge of high pressure around the Azores extending in towards Spain and Portugal. To get a locked in cold pattern, we need to get rid of that Azores high, send it off that way towards Bermuda, send the ridge that sort of way, and then we can properly start to lock into a cold pattern, because this trough needs to shift further. So you want to see the trough to get a cold pattern, you want to see the trough moving through Spain and Portugal into the Mediterranean, opening the floodgates for us to the northerly and easterly winds. So despite the fact we've got a very nice ridge there, it is a pretty good ridge across Scandinavia and northern Russia, because the Azores high isn't shifting out into the middle of the Atlantic, or the tropical Atlantic, because the trough that's around the UK isn't moving far enough south at the moment. It looks as though we probably don't get this really cold air coming in from the north and the east, but you'll gather from that that there isn't a great deal in it, and it will only take very subtle adjustments to start to really open the door to some very cold air from the north and the east. So we certainly have to keep an eye on it, because it's a long way off still, fairly long way off, and things could still change actually with this one. But at the moment it looks as though we stay fairly mild, not as mild as we've had it through December, but fairly mild and probably wet through the first week of January. That's the latest idea, but it could change. These are the GFS temperature and precipitation ensembles for the next couple of weeks. A red line here is the 30-year temperature average. So again, we're significantly above average at the moment, and we have been throughout December, and it is going to be the warmest December on central England temperature records. Maybe not for Scotland, where it's been a bit colder, on the colder side of the jet at times, but certainly for the south of the country, it's going to be a record-breakingly warm December. Now, as we go through to New Year, this is the 1st of January just here, we find the temperatures dropping, not going especially cold, but certainly cooler through that first week of January. There's no real cold outliers here suggesting easterly or northeasterly winds. If there was, we would be seeing the ensemble members going down to that sort of level. So definitely the GFS has backed off from bringing in these cold easterly winds. What probably happens is that we bring colder air in from the Atlantic on several of these ensemble members, which is the route towards lowering the temperature. But there's no real suggestion on that ensemble anyway that we bring in easterly winds. However, the ECWF, I'll show you in a moment, is still going for some easterly winds in the first week of January. More alarming than the temperatures is the rainfall spikes. You'll see from this we've got a huge number of spikes through the course of the first week of January. Looks like it's going to be an exceptionally wet period coming up. The reason being, of course, that we've got this Atlantic onslaught still going on with the jet streams shifting further south. So it brings the worst of the rain into the south of the country, but we've got this ridge to the northeast, which is a strong ridge. It's going to delay the progress of these weather fronts across the country, so we could well get stalling fronts producing copious amounts of rain through the first week of January. And of course, we've already got severe problems with flooding. Things can only get worse if that comes off through the first week of January. Temperature anomaly for the coming week, 28th of December through to 5th of January, shows that the west of Europe, the UK, Ireland, France, Spain, Portugal, still a little bit above average, but the east and the northeast of Europe coming out colder than average. Expect these charts to turn even colder over the next few days. I think we will see a real plunge of wind coming along in the east and the northeast of Europe. Rainfall anomalies look wetter than average through the west of Europe, so the UK, Ireland, France, Spain, Portugal generally coming out with above average rainfall. The driest anomalies are to the east and the northeast under that ridge. Here's the GFS then for Friday, New Year's Day, and there's the ridge across the north of Scandinavia to bring that cold air into the east of Europe. We're still in an Atlantic driven pattern at this point, with the next area of low pressure waiting in the wings. We move through to the 2nd of January, and you see a real battle is going on here at the weekend, with the high pressure to the northeast trying to bring these cold easterly winds, the low pressure in the Atlantic trying to keep us mild under westerlies and southwesterlies. We're in the battleground, probably just on the mild side of things, but not a huge amount in it. There's the upper air temperatures. You can see the extent of the cold pool across the east of Europe. Severely cold air plunging out of Russia into the east of Europe. The west of Europe certainly is milder. Even here it is turning a bit colder. We're losing the warmth from the tropical Atlantic and bringing in the air from a more polar maritime source into the west of Europe. But the real cold associated with this high pressure over Scandinavia, the brutal cold, is to the east of Europe. We go through to Sunday the 3rd, still battle going on between this high pressure to the east and the northeast, but low pressure out in the west. That looks very nasty for Monday the 4th of January. That's a very intense area of low pressure coming in off the Atlantic. Will be a lot of rain with that. And then we move through into Friday into Tuesday, the 5th of January. Still generally unsettled, more low pressure systems coming through. And this is quite interesting, actually. What's going on up to day 10 is that we are bringing that cold air from the east out of Scandinavia, sending it towards Iceland, and then bringing it back round via westerlies. So that doesn't happen very often, but the cold is doing something a little bit like that. So it is actually turning colder, and some of the air anyway is associated with this brutal cold that's up over the northeast of Europe. It's just coming at us via a very, very long way round via the Atlantic. But the upshot is it does turn a bit colder as we get through to the second half of next week, and this low pressure is quite interesting coming in from the Atlantic. That's within fairly cold air, and it's a bit of a channel low, so it could produce snow if it was to come off like that, but it's a long way off, 252 hours on the 7th of January. Now, the ECMWF is still keen on bringing these easterly winds to us. So this is the chart for New Year's Day. Again, high pressure to the east, low pressure to the west. It's a case of let battle commence. However, the ECM places the high pressure closer to us. So as we run through the weekend, through the 2nd and 3rd of January, still generally Atlantic driven with the pattern. But on Monday the 4th, the low pressure dives southwards. And that does open the door then to colder easterly winds. There's the extent of the cold pull through Scandinavia and eastern parts of Europe on the 4th of January, and these easterlies do start to move in as we go through to Tuesday the 5th of January. So for a time anyway, we bring colder air from the east. There's the upper air temperatures showing those colder upper air temperatures moving in from the east and the northeast, and then middle part of next week brings low pressure back in from the Atlantic, so that's running into cold air, possibly producing a snow event on the 6th of January, and then it's back to an Atlantic driven pattern just about, but again it's very close to producing quite a bitter easterly flow. So the ECM does get there for a day or two and brings these easterlies in before they're cut off from the Atlantic. But GFS, not really, but the colder air from the east does eventually get to us via westerlies. What we can take from all of this is that it's a very, very complex pattern. As it always is when you get the ridge setting up to the northeast. The models don't handle it particularly well, so model reliability does tend to plunge quite a lot. And I think just going to have to wait and see really where this is excuse me, where this is going. It could well be that we do stay in a milder westerly flow, but don't rule out, even today with models backing off from it a bit, don't rule out the chance that this ridge to the northeast could be stronger and could bring us some easterlies next week. I'm certainly not ruling out the possibility that that could happen. So it's going to be a case of watch your space, keep an eye on the updates over the next few days. We're certainly in the most interesting phase of the winter so far from a cold perspective. Whether it really comes to very much is what we've got to wait and see. But yeah, whenever you get these ridges to the northeast and this brutal cold plunging into the east of Europe, you do have to watch out a little bit because it sends the models into a state of flux. They don't handle it very well, and let's just wait and see where this is going. Alright, that's all for now. Thanks for watching.